So you're looking to dip your toes in the market of Festool sanders. Well, what I have here on the table is two of the most common and most popular sanders that Festool offers. The purpose of this video is to give you some key features and discuss some of the differences between the two to help guide you in the right direction with your purchase. Now, the sanders that we have on the table here is the ETS EC line of sanders, random orbit, and then we have the Rotex line of sanders, which is also random orbit, but has one added feature. The first consideration that you want to make is what it is that you're sanding, right? Because that is going to dictate which sander is going to be best for the application that you are doing on a regular basis. Now, the first thing to identify is what is referred to as the stroke. So if you look at one of these sanders, the ETS EC 125/3, that /3 means that the random orbit size is 3 millimeters. So that is going to put it at a much tighter resolution than the ETS EC 150/5. This has a 5 millimeter stroke. So what does the larger stroke mean? It means that it is going to be more aggressive because it has a more aggressive sanding pattern. Now, both with the 125 series and the 150 series, you do have a 3-stroke and a 5-stroke. So the easiest way to think of this would be, if you're sanding wood, a 5-stroke is probably going to be a better option. If you are sanding finishes or very delicate surfaces or materials, then a 3-stroke may be a better option. Now, let me give you a real-world example of that. What we have here is a piece of poplar. Hardwood, not veneered. This is going to be sanded much quicker with a more aggressive orbit, in this case being a 5-stroke. As opposed to plywood. A 5-stroke may end up getting a little bit too aggressive depending on the thickness of the veneer. And that is where maybe a 3-stroke could be a better option. Now, that is not saying that you can't use the more aggressive sander on plywood. Just understand that the more aggressive orbit is going to make the process faster. So one big thing that I would say is that if you hate sanding, then going with something with a larger stroke makes more sense. Now, what does a 6-inch versus a 5-inch do for you? Well, it's going to give you over 30% more surface area, therefore making sanding much faster. So now we're going to talk about the Rotex side of sanders. So we have the Rotex 90, the 125, and the 150. Before we get into that, I do want to discuss what the 125, the 90, and the 150 actually mean. So when we say 125, we're talking about a 5-inch sander, which is very common among many other brands on the market. This is going to be what you see more commonly. The 150 means 150 millimeters or 6 inches. Now, each one of these two models does come in both the 125 and the 150. We have the added addition of the 90. So this would be the equivalent to, say, a 3.5-inch sander. Now, this is a very specialized sander in the sense that obviously you don't have nearly as much surface area. So this is not going to be great for every application, but if you're somebody that's doing a lot of smaller material, say face frames, and you need to sand those, and more importantly, be aggressive, this is going to be a great option for you. But what's going to be a more realistic option for most people is going to be the 125 or the 150. Now, we talked about stroke with the ETS EC line. Let's briefly discuss some of the stroke options with the Rotex line. So while they both are the Rotex sander, and not only will they act as a random orbital sander, but you also have the ability to make it a geared random orbital sander, which is what makes these sanders so aggressive at removing material. Now, they are same in name, but they are not same in aggressiveness. The Rotex 125 has a stroke of 3.6 millimeters, where the Rotex 150 has a 5 millimeter stroke. So going back to what I said here, if you're somebody that doesn't like sanding, the more aggressive stroke is going to do the job faster. If I was to take the 150 in Rotex mode and the 125 in Rotex mode, theoretically, this is going to sand faster than this because of the more aggressive stroke. Same thing applies with the ETS EC models. If I sand with a 5-stroke and a 3-stroke, 5-stroke is going to get it done quicker. Now let's go with use cases for the Rotex line of sanders. What I like the Rotex for, and what they're so well known for, is their ability to be ultra aggressive because of the gear mode. Now let's see if we can hear the click. That is a pin locking in. So it's still going to move in its random orbit. However, it is now gear driven, so it is going to be incredibly, incredibly aggressive at removing material. And where that would come into play is on rough lumber, or if I'm trying to remove multiple layers of paint, or anything where I need to remove as much material, flatten something out as quickly as possible, the Rotex is going to be the right choice because it is incredibly aggressive. But now let's go ahead and flip that and say, would I want to use a Rotex in Rotex mode on plywood? Probably not, because you're going to burn through that veneer very quickly. So again, it goes back to what application you're going to be using it for. The most important thing, what do I need a sander for? What am I looking to get out of it? And then that will help you decide which one is right for you. And finally, the last thing that I want to highlight is the ergonomics of each one of these. There is a case to be made that a Rotex, since it does have both random orbit mode to give you a nice finish, just like this random orbital sander would do, but it also has the gear-driven mode. So you kind of get the best of both worlds. But from an ergonomic standpoint, this is obviously a much larger and much heavier sander than this. Even with this having a lower stroke, it has a higher stroke than the ETS/3 line of sanders. With the Rotex models, in most cases, you are going to be using two hands to operate it, as opposed to a one-handed operation with the ETS EC models. So those are some of the key, most common differences between these two very popular sanders. Hopefully the information in this video helps you better identify which one of these sanders would be right for you in your shop.